Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have yet another stream. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I'm getting ready for a little vacation. I probably won't stream tomorrow night. Slim chance I might stream some tomorrow afternoon, but we'll see how that goes. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I'm in Vermont. I am up in Vermont with my comrades for our 4-day educational workshop. If you haven't heard about it, it's going to be great. We got a decent crew of folks coming, and we are going to do some educational classes about anti-imperialism, and we're going to plan for a summer of revolutionary anti-imperialism. I had a great meeting this afternoon with some comrades, internationally, and there's plans for for some great actions coming up later in the summer around the NATO summit and other things. And so, yeah, this is where I'm going to be all weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And we're going to be using the new textbook, which is really, people are telling me how much they love this. It is not a small book. This is a big textbook with a lot of information in it. People are really, really pumped about it. Out of the movement to the masses, anti-imperialist organizing in America. Very related to what I'm streaming about tonight, my opening remarks. And so we'll be using our new textbook, and we're going to do some classes, and we're going to do some discussion, and we're going to engage with people. And it's going to be really awesome. It is going to be a really, really awesome weekend in the mountains to prepare for a summer of anti-imperialist organizing. A lot of great stuff is going on. So, the way these streams work, for those of you who may not be familiar, I give my opening remarks, whatever it is I want to talk about. I give my opening remarks. Then from there, we do a roll call, or I find out who is watching, who's on the other side of the camera, names and locations. Then from there, after I do the roll call, after I give my opening remarks, then I answer people's super chat questions for the rest of the night. They're questions that they ask. That's what gives me something to talk about in the second half of the show. So if you got something you want me to talk about, all you need to do is send me a super chat here on YouTube or a Rumble rant on Rumble, and I will do my best to give you an answer. The second half of the show is all you guys. Those of you that are watching live have the power to make the conversation go however you want. So use your power wisely. Give me something to respond to in the second half of the program. That is what I ask you to do. So I will just jump into my opening remarks for tonight. So I was just up at Columbia University today. Again, I was there on Monday. I covered the protests. There's an encampment inside the campus. They have locked down the campus. You can't get into the campus unless you have a student ID. All the gates are shut. And then there are daily protests that are assembling outside the campus to support the Palestine protesters inside, the students that are protesting inside the campus. And now these encampments are springing up all across the country. There was already an encampment at Yale. On Monday, there was an encampment that got set up at NYU that was violently cleared out. There is an encampment at the University of Michigan. And now apparently there are 32 different campuses that have encampments. I believe John McCarthy shared with me a graphic, and I will put it on the screen, of all the different universities that now have pro-Palestine encampments set up at them. We'll put it on the screen. It's a very, very exciting development. And it's a good development. At this point, there's an encampment at City University of New York, at New School, University of Rochester, New York, University of California, Berkeley, University of Southern California, Los Angeles, California State Polytechnic Institute, Yale, Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, University of Maryland, Harvard University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Columbia University, Tufts in Medford, Massachusetts, the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Princeton University, University of New Mexico, Ohio State University, UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Charlotte, Temple University in Philadelphia, University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, Florida International University in Miami, University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas, University of Arizona in Tucson, University of Texas A&M, College Station, Texas, University of Texas, Austin, University of Dallas in Texas, University of Indiana, Purdue in Indianapolis. This is a lot of different places that students are going out and setting up encampments to support the Palestinians. And that's a great development. And I mean, we think it's a great development because the Palestinians are being killed. They're being murdered by Israel, and the whole world is opposed to it. And the American people are opposed to it. At this point, public opinion polls show that the majority of Americans don't want the American government to be sending more money to Israel, to be protecting Israel. The majority of Americans want a ceasefire in Gaza. So this is the majority opinion in America. But the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both under the control of the pro-Israel imperialist establishment. And so because of that, at this point, the U.S. government continues to engage and back up Israel. And so we have people taking to their college campuses and engaging in occupations. And this is a good thing. This is a very good thing. And I was just at Columbia today, interviewed some students that were part of it. And it's worth pointing out that mainstream media is making these protests into a scandal. And they're not making it a scandal, what Israel is doing in Gaza 24 hours a day, killing the Palestinians. Instead, they're making it a scandal that students are daring to protest it. The notion that these protests are somehow anti-Jewish, these students hate Jews and are targeting Jews is bullshit. The majority of the protesters that I've spoken to at Columbia are themselves Jewish. There's a clip going around of this woman who went to the NYU occupation with a shirt on that said Jew and it had a Star of David, and she was walking around and people were calling her so brave, but it was comedy because no one cares. They're not there to oppose Jews. They're not anti-Semitic. And in fact, most of the protesters are themselves Jewish, at least at Columbia and at NYU, maybe not in other universities. So this notion that somehow this is an anti-Jewish mobilization is just the most ridiculous claim. And anyone who goes and talks to these students knows that's the case. It's an anti-Israel mobilization, that is for sure. But regardless, I want the name of this stream is not College Palestine Encampments Happen. That is not the name of this stream. There's plenty of activist news outlets that are reporting on this. Democracy Now, various Mint Press. There's plenty of media that is just telling you what's happening, right? I'm sure PSL's Breakthrough News is all over it. And, there's many outlets that are just kind of telling you what's happening. But that is not the duty of revolutionaries. I want to point you all toward a very, very, very important book that was written a long time ago called What Is to Be Done? And this is not an easy book to read. And, but it's one of the most important books ever written in the history of revolutionary movements. And the reason this book is important is because it talks about where revolutions come from, how revolutions are made, and if there's anybody who has the right to talk about such a thing, it would be the author of this book, Vladimir Lenin. He made the Russian Revolution, and most of the revolutions of the 20th century were made by people who followed his ideology and his teachings. The Chinese Revolution was made by Marxist-Leninists. The Cuban Revolution was made by Marxist-Leninists. The various revolutions that have happened, communist revolutions, socialist revolutions, have largely been made by people who followed Vladimir Lenin's strategy and tactics. And the book, What Is to Be Done, talks about situations kind of like the one we're in now. Not exactly like the one we're in now, but kind of like the one that we're in now. It talks about what you do as a revolutionary when this is happening. How do you intervene? What is the correct response? Because the typical response that you get from a lot of standard leftists is, yay, it's amazing. Well, and it is, right? And that's good. When we see a rebellion of the people against imperialism, against something that the imperialists are doing, when we see a mobilization in opposition to imperialism, that's a good thing. But if that's all you do, you're not really taking history into your own hands. And this book talks a lot about what it calls tailism, or bowing to spontaneity, and how when there is an uprising, a mobilization of the people, when that happens, simply going along with it isn't doing your job as a revolutionary. The job of revolutionaries is to try and move events like this, or spontaneous uprisings of the people, in a revolutionary direction. And that if you just kind of chase after these things, which is what a lot of revolutionaries are doing. It's probably what all the communist groups are doing. I was just up there at Columbia, and I'll tell you, on Monday, I was there. PSL is leading these protests. They're leading the protests. And then in addition to that, you have Trotskyites there selling their newspapers. You got the RCP standing on street corners yelling about Bob Avakian. I saw them there today. They had set up a little display, and they were yelling about Bob Avakian and expressing support for the protesters. I saw a Socialist Alternative, the Trotskyite group. They were there. They had a literature table with anti-China pamphlets about how China is imperialist. And all the communist groups now that exist are running to these campuses and saying to the students that are doing this, we're communists and we support you. And that's what they're doing. And they are applauding that this is happening. And they are then trying to recruit the students to be communists on the basis of the fact that we're communists and we support you. So therefore, and we're here supporting you, and you're already doing this, and we like what you're doing, so you ought to join our group. And we have a book that we can sell you to explain to you our ideology and theory. And, here we are. We're supporting you. You're against the government. You're engaged in some kind of protest. And we happen to be communists, and we happen to support you. And we also have a book we can give you to explain why these things are happening, so you should join our group. Well, that's called bowing to spontaneity. You're not really offering anything. You're not really putting forward a perspective about how to change society. You're just kind of seeing a good development, a spontaneous development, something that would have happened with or without you, and you're running to it and trying to gain from it, I guess. You're trying to recruit from it. You're trying to get the people involved to like you because you support it. And that's called bowing to spontaneity. It's funny because it's not just communists. Today at Columbia University, there was one corner, where it was like across from the campus where off-campus groups could set up shop. And the RCP was set up there, the Revolutionary Communist Party. They were on the bullhorn. And in addition to the Revolutionary Communist Party, you had a vegetarian religious group, a group of religious vegetarians. I don't know what religious sect it was, but they oppose eating meat. And they were there also trying to argue that the genocide in Gaza is rooted in eating meat, the cruelty to animals, and that if people stopped eating meat, there would not be killing in Gaza, and urging the students at Columbia to all become vegetarians. And they're doing the same thing the communists are doing, right? Something happened, right? The balloon went up. There's a rebellion taking place. There's people that are going against the government, that are going against the state. And so all kinds of people with all kinds of different political agendas run to it and say, I support you and I have my ideology or my niche or whatever, and you should all support me. I also ran into an evangelical Christian minister who's anti-Israel. That was interesting. He was a Trump-supporting evangelical Christian minister who was against Israel. And he was walking around the campus. He had a sign that said, America first, not Israel first. And he was walking around, right? And he wanted to read people the Bible about why Israel went against the Bible. There's a lot of that, right? And that's what happens, right? When you have a big uprising, or an uprising that gets lots of publicity and attention, you generally get all kinds of people, including communist groups, but not just communist groups, vegetarians, evangelical Christian ministers, running there and saying, we are in support of you and we have our ideology, so you should adopt our ideology, you should join our organization because of the fact that we support you. And this is generally not a very effective strategy, right? And I'm telling you this as somebody who has done this for years. I was in the Workers' World Party for many years, and whenever there was some kind of uprising or something happening, Occupy Wall Street or whatever, there were many times, especially because I was their young organizer and I didn't have another job. I was on staff with them, and some kind of big protest would happen and they would call me up and I would be getting on a train or a bus and going there and showing up and saying, I support you. And here's a communist newspaper. And, that was how we acted, right? It's just, something's happening. And, we happen to agree with the general cause. So we show up. That is called bowing to spontaneity. And that's called tailism. You're not leading the masses of people. You're not making things happen. You're not moving what's happening out from under the leadership of the ruling class. You're just kind of showing up at events that are already happening, spontaneous events, and you're just kind of showing support for them and announcing your ideology while you support them. And what will inevitably happen is that these events will naturally become absorbed by somebody from the ruling class. One section of the ruling class or other will absorb this movement and move it back into the system, move it in a non-revolutionary direction. Right? And this classic example that Lenin talks about in this book, What is to be Done, is strikes. Right? You have a bunch of workers, they go on strike. And it's usually a spontaneous strike. The boss is not treating them right, so they go on strike and they have their strike. And maybe a bunch of communists find out there's a strike and they run there and say, we support you and we're communists, and the workers say, great, that's nice. And then, eventually, some kind of reformist labor leader or whatever mobilizes them to go back to work and the upsurge, the rebellion, fades into nothing. Right. And that the whole book that Lenin wrote, What Is to Be Done, was ranting against this tendency, this practice, this tactical blunder called bowing to spontaneity. That's the whole book. What Is to Be Done was written about the question of bowing to spontaneity, and how if you just bow to spontaneity, you just go along with what's already there. If you do that, you're just basically not leading anything in a good direction. That the job of revolutionaries, when they see some kind of rebellion, generally their job is to try and guide it in a good direction, to try and point it toward being a fight with the entire system, and to try and intervene in a way that makes the struggle bigger. That's generally what communists are supposed to do. If there's a labor struggle and there's some workers that are on strike, the job of communists is to go there and mobilize support for the workers, connect the workers with different organizations, and in addition to that, try to push the union into a confrontational direction, right? That's the idea, right? That's the way one intervenes. Now, we're not in a position to do that with these Palestine protests. But before I explain what I think we should do at the Palestine protests, which I have an answer, and that answer is not just go there and say, oh, we support it and we happen to be. No, I have an answer about what we should do. But before I get there, I actually want to point to an example that recently came into my memory. All right, this is an example of how we were able to intervene in a struggle, and it was one of the most effective interventions that I pulled off, right? And I actually, in the end, at the very end of this book, right, the final chapter of this book is about the history of CPI, and in all of the sections of this book that talk about everything, we have original texts, and so I include at the end of this some original internal documents I wrote when I was in the Workers' World Party. And one of those documents that I wrote is called The Way Out. And it was a document that I wrote for the youth organization, just basically right before I was leaving the party. And I wrote this document, The Way Out, and I almost didn't publish it because it didn't exactly, the way I'm organizing now and the kind of work I'm doing now doesn't exactly match. But this was back in 2015. This is The Way Out. This is an internal document I wrote for the Workers' World Party youth group, Fight Imperialism, Stand Together. Because what had happened was in Baltimore, where there was a significant Workers' World Party branch in Baltimore, there was a police murder of Freddie Gray. And that police murder spawned a large urban rebellion. And there started being protests every day against the killing of Freddie Gray and against the police in Baltimore, because this black man had been killed, and he'd been killed wrongfully by the police. They'd seen what had happened in Ferguson. So starting, every day there started being rallies. And so I was thinking, having read all of these books and having thought, I had been at part of Occupy Wall Street. And I thought, how can a communist group intervene at Occupy Wall Street? And I had figured there's going to be more spontaneous uprisings. So how do we intervene effectively when there is a spontaneous uprising, and effectively build our organization and build our revolutionary movement and guide anyone we can guide there in an anti-imperialist direction? How can we intervene? And I thought a lot about what could we have done at Occupy Wall Street that would have been effective, and what intervention could we do? And I thought a lot about it. And so this rebellion, these daily protests that led ultimately to rioting, where the National Guard was sent in Baltimore, were happening. They were happening. And I talked on the phone to my comrades. And I said, how should we intervene? What can we do? And they said, well, there's a debate happening at all the protests, because they have these ministers that come out. It's largely black young people that are protesting. And these ministers are there leading these marches. And the teenagers, the black teenagers, start chanting, "Fuck the police, fuck the police." And the black ministers say to them, "Don't say that, don't say that." And there's a divide because a lot of the young teenagers really want to say "fuck the police" because they're angry at the police because of the killing of Freddie Gray. And a lot of the parents, the ministers are saying, "Don't say that." So we wrote a leaflet, a very carefully worded leaflet. And the leaflet said, "Youth have the right to say, fuck the police." That's what it said. It didn't say fuck the police. It said youth have the right to say fuck the police. And we wrote, that young people are having trouble getting jobs. Young people are struggling. They're setting up a low-wage police state right now. And young people are angry about this. And who says that protest always has to be polite? And these young people feel legitimate anger. And we have free speech in this country. Young people have the right to say, fuck the police. That's what our leaflet said. And it was a very well-designed leaflet. It wasn't very long, too. It was like 4 paragraphs. But at the top, it just said, youth have the right to say, fuck the police. And we distributed about 1,000 copies of this leaflet at the protests. And I got to tell you, the phone number that we put on that leaflet was ringing off the hook. There were over 300 people that called and wanted to join Fight Imperialism, Stand Together, the youth group, because of that leaflet. It was a very effective intervention because there was a division among the protesters about should young people be saying this. And we put ourselves on one side of that division and put out a leaflet that gave expression to one side of a division that already existed and made our organization the voice of one side of a controversy that existed within these protesters. And by doing that, we captured the attention of a lot of people and we inserted ourselves into the conversation that was going on. It was a very effective intervention. And I must say that that was far more effective than anything else that the party had done during that rebellion. Most of what the Workers' World Party just did was bowing to spontaneity. But that was one situation where we intervened. Now, at this point, I look back on that and I say, was that even really, the way I organize now, the way I see things now, was that even really the best, thing to do? I don't know, right? But for what we were trying to achieve, the strategy of the Workers' World Party was take over the movement, have our Marxist-Leninist anti-imperialist group become the leader of the Black movement, of the Black Rebellion. In order to advance that cause, that was an effective intervention. Now, I don't think that that's what revolutionaries should be trying to do, but for what our orientation was at the time, which was that our communist group should become the leader of the Black movement. Our communist group should be on the vanguard of Black people rebelling against racism. What we did in that situation was a great step toward that goal. It was probably the most effective time where there was a rebellion going on, and we intervened in that rebellion by saying that young people have the right to say F the police. And that's an example of revolutionaries intervening, right? And if we had done what the party generally did, which is just applaud, yay, these people are protesting and we support you, it wouldn't have had that effect. The way we got people's attention was we took sides in a controversy that currently existed among the protesters. We put ourselves on one side and we loudly gave voice to one side of that controversy. We did so strategically. Our leaflet didn't just say F the police. It said young people have the right to say that, right? And we were made a point of having our organization come to the defense of young people who didn't want to contain their anger anymore. They were angry about the police state. They were angry about how Freddie Gray had been killed. They were angry about the way there were people in their community telling them to tone it down. And so we, with our leaflet, became the voice that was giving them permission to feel the way that they felt. And that was a very effective intervention. And it made us relevant in the conversation. So, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, one thing that might be helpful is if there are people watching this who are affiliated with the Center for Political Innovation or agree with the message of this live stream that we talk about, the city building tendency, right? One thing you might want to do is go to these encampments and just be part of these encampments, but find out where the disagreements are, because there are big disagreements among the students, and find out where the students disagree with each other as they carry out these protests, and figure out if some of the students are more anti-imperialist than others, and find a way to position yourself as a CPI member as aligning with the more radical faction of the students. And that might be a way that you can gain an audience with the more revolutionary minded students. That might be a way that you can help push these encampments in a more revolutionary direction. That's one thing that you could do. I don't know what the disagreements among these students are, right? You can't walk into Columbia University and talk to these students. And honestly, it wouldn't be safe for me to do so, right? I have been so viciously canceled, and these students don't like me. I'll just tell you that much, right? They all know, not all of them, that's an exaggeration. A lot of them know who I am because they watched some BreadTube video that says I'm a satanic neo-Nazi cult leader, and they all hate me. And I've actually had a number of people recognize me and be like, "Oh, you're the bad person. How am I bad?" I don't know, but everyone says you're bad. They've done a lot to destroy my reputation in communist and woke circles, right? The first thing anybody learns when they get into communism is there's this guy out there named Caleb, and he's bad. He's bad. Why is he bad? Oh, he's bad because he's bad. And that's because I'm tied to like the actual global communist movement. The thing is, and this is where I don't agree with what I did when I was in the Workers' World Party. I'm not even sure about that. And honestly, I as much as I'm glad these students are doing what they're doing, I'm glad somebody's speaking out about Gaza. I don't feel like it's necessarily going to lead us anywhere good. Is what I've just continued to come back to. I mean, there's a reason that this book is called Out of the Movement to the Masses. Right? That's why it's called Out of the Movement to the Masses, is that this is very much a movement mobilization, and the movement is dead. The movement is a dead end. Look, I've been to Columbia twice now, and I've talked to these people, and these students are not talking about how we need money for jobs and schools and education, not weapons for Israel. They're not saying that. They're not saying, why is our government, serving Israel when it could be serving the American people? They're not saying we need a government of action to fight for working families. These protests are not something that an average American family could take their kids to. It's not, right? This isn't something that a working class person would want to go to, right? These are college kids, and they're woke, and they're angry, and they got their keffiyehs on, and and the drums are pounding, and it's intifada, and all the speeches are about white colonialism, and America's a racist settler country, and white privilege, and all that. Wow, and it's shrill, and it's woke, and it's rage, and it's scary, and it's I can't even stand it, right? I mean, I'm somebody, I spent my whole 20s doing this stuff, and it just sickens me, honestly. I really hate going to these rallies because I've done it so much, and I know that it just burns you out after a while, right? These are not rallies that most average working class people think they could just go to, even if they agree with it, right? They give off a shrill, rage-filled, hostile tone. They very much have made the enemy the American people, not imperialism. They're not trying to appeal to the masses of people. They're instead trying to appeal to people that are already angry. These protests they're not trying to reach the masses of people. Okay. They're just not. And we're not going to be able to change that. The idea that we could come there and, if we showed up with American flags, we might get beaten up, right? I mean, these people are so triggered by American flags and so triggered by, they might attack us if we showed up. They might attack us just for handing out CPI leaflets. It depends where you go. But the question isn't how can we really push these protests in a better direction, because they're not going to go in a better direction. PSL is running the show, and PSL hates the American working class. I mean, that is just a fact. They hate the American working class, right? They think that the American working class are all white supremacist neo-Nazis. They think Trump is the main danger, right? PSL hates the American working class for not being woke, right? They hate red state workers. There is a reason that the anti-war movement in the United States is so small, despite the fact that anti-war sentiments are through the roof. And that's because it's run by PSL. And PSL does everything it can to make the protests as woke and politically correct and anti-working class as they possibly can. It's about, identity politics and PSL is an anti-working class organization. They hate Trump supporters. They supported the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates. They want Donald Trump. Their criticism after January 6th was that Donald Trump didn't imprison more, was that Biden didn't jail almost all of the Trump supporters. He didn't lock up enough people. They want more of a police state, right? They're running on a degrowth platform. If you read their presidential campaign platform, it calls for completely de-electrifying most of the United States. They're an anti-working class group, and they run it, right? And PSL, their entire goal is to be king of the protest cage. And that's fine. Let them have the protest cage, because we want to organize the masses. That's what we want to organize. We want to organize the American people who've been left behind, right? And the American people who've been left behind aren't part of these protests. They're not. So at the end of the day, we don't have any illusion that these protests are going to move in a good direction, that we're going to be able to really intervene and push these protests toward being the anti-imperialist movement we need. We don't have any illusion about that. The thing is, though, there are a lot of young people who attend these rallies because they're in college, and these rallies are happening at their college, and they're against Israel, and they're going to go to these rallies, and they're young, and they're still figuring out how the world works in their minds. And there's probably a lot of those young people that would understand what CPI is about and would be won to CPI's message if somebody presented it to them. And that's why there's this desperate need to inoculate every person who gets interested in socialism and communism about CPI and why it's evil, and why I in particular am evil, right? I mean, because they know that I'm really, very few YouTube channels can explain Marxism the way I can. No other organization in the United States can publish a book like this, okay? And that I understand this stuff, and I explain this stuff in a way that doesn't go on other YouTube channels, right? And that I have a more realistic assessment, and the message that I put forward, the optimistic, patriotic socialism, the city-building tendency, there's a reason that we are so respected, right? There's a reason I was selected to be the chair of the World Youth Festival delegation from the United States. There's a reason I was selected to ask President Vladimir Putin a question. There's a reason that President Riazi, the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, asked to have me interview him at the United Nations. Cynthia McKinney, the congresswoman, I don't know if you saw this, but the congresswoman Cynthia McKinney tweeted out our upcoming retreat in Vermont. She tweeted it out and invited people to go. And she's a former U.S. congresswoman who's now a college professor in Bangladesh. There's a reason that we are respected. It's because people around the world know that we're really the only communist group in America that sounds like communists around the world, right? You go to Vietnam, communists aren't saying burn it down, tear it down. They're not going, they're not, hateful, shrill people, intifada. No, they're people who love their country and love their community and want to empower and embolden and build. Communists in Vietnam are motivated by love. Communists in China, the All China Youth Federation, they're motivated by love. Communists in Russia, they love Russia. The leader of their party, Gennady Zhiganov, is an Orthodox Christian. Communists in Nicaragua, we're the only group in America. I mean, there's others. There's, there's some people that are like us in their own way. The Uhuru movement, they love their own people, but they're for black people only. It's a black movement, right? And there's, the Party of Communists. There's a lot of good people in that group, and that there's a lot of overlap. But overall, the only people that are throwing down out of the movement to the masses, we want nothing to do with the shrill, destructive, woke left. We are motivated by love of country, love of community, optimism. We're the only constructive, optimistic socialist group. We're the only socialist group that gives off the vibe that we give off, right? We give off an optimistic, happy, loving vibe, not an angry, tear it down, rage-filled vibe, right? We sound like communists around the world, and we're the only ones that do that for the most part. I mean, like I said, there's some good people in various places, and we have a lot of allies and friends and network. But overall, right, the movement, communist groups in general, are run by people that are motivated by very different things. They're motivated by a desire to get their rage and anger out. They're motivated by feelings of rebellion. They view the masses of people with contempt and want to see them pay for being imperialist suckers. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. So we're a different kind of thing. The idea that we could mobilize all our forces and go to these protests and just change their character, that's not going to happen. However, what is possible is that you, I'm talking to you, the person watching this, if you're part of our community, you understand why PSL is bullshit. You understand why we need to get out of the movement into the masses. You understand why these protests are not really helping that much, because they're making enemies out of the American people. What you can do, and this is probably the most important thing for you to do, is go to these protests and lurk. That sounds stupid. It sounds like an idiotic thing to say. Go to these protests and lurk, but I'm serious. Go to these protests and lurk. Lurk. Observe. And look for people that have the same feelings that we have. People that are there because they oppose Israel, they oppose what it's doing in Gaza, but they're asking the same questions. Why are we trying to alienate the American people? Why don't we have American flags? Why are we having to have a debate about mansplaining? Why do we have to have group therapy because somebody made a comment? We have to have a big intervention about people being made unsafe. Yet, look for the people. Just lurk. Don't say anything. Just be there. Be a supporter. Don't push CPI too hard. You don't even have to say you're CPI. And just start looking for people at the protest who are better than the people running these protests. Look for the better people. Go there and lurk. Attend the protests and look for the better people. And find the better people and be their friends. Find the better people and be their friends. Don't try to recruit them to CPI. Just be their friends. Find the better people. Get their phone number. Get their Facebook. And latch on to them. And then gradually start talking to those people about CPI. But gradually. Don't do it at first. The main thing is to latch on. Find the better people, and the better people at these protests are going to be isolated, because the mob is woke and the mob is negative, and the better people are going to be kind of uncomfortable at these protests, but they're going to be there because they agree, but they're going to be uncomfortable with the atmosphere. Find those people, pick them out, and just get to know them. Ask them about their lives. Find out where they came from. Find out what their favorite movie is. Find out how they get along with their family. Find out if they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Get to know them. Be their friend. find a common interest that you have with some of the better people at these protests and develop a bond with the better people. And then, as these protests wind down, which the semester is almost over, gradually start talking to them about the Center for Political Innovation. And I know this kind of sucks because this isn't a quick strategy. It's not. And it actually requires a huge amount of patience on your part. Right? But I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to point these protests in a good direction, right? These protests, the message is good, right? The message is absolutely good, is stop bombing Gaza. The message is absolutely good. But the people running these protests are evil, all right? There's just no way around that. Brian Becker is evil, right? The people running the people running these protests are evil, right? And you can tell that. That's why these protests exude hate. That's why these protests exude negativity. That's why these protests are trying to go out of their way to alienate average Americans. That's why these protests make average Americans the enemy, is the people that control the left in America, right? The movement hustlers, the people that are kings of the protest cage are evil, okay? And I, as someone who spent their entire adult life in the communist movement, that's a fact. Brian Becker is an evil person, all right? He is just an evil person, right? He knows that there is no way in hell PSL is ever going to come to power. He knows there's no way in hell that there's ever going to be a mass anti-war movement. He doesn't care. He's going out of his way to make sure that the anti-war movement stays small so he can be the boss of it. That's evil, right? And the way that they have spread lies about me on the internet and threatened me and threatened my family, and they're evil people. They really are evil people. And but you're not going to change things by showing up and announcing, you guys are evil, you should do it this way. That's going to lead to you being isolated. And they have the group. They've got billions of dollars from Roy Singham. They're going to run these protests, and they're going to use these protests. Okay, let me point to something, right? And I guess what I'm about to point to, what's happening now is a weird taste of things to come. Let me put it that way, right? And forgive me for that tangent about people being evil. It doesn't matter if they're evil or not. That's not the point, right? The point is, how can we intervene in these protests and get them to go in a good direction, right? And I want to show you this clip, because this clip is very, very important. It's a very, very important clip, because there's a lot of things happening in American politics now that are very, very, very important, that give very important context to these protests, right? This was at the University of Texas today. I believe this was in Austin, Texas, right? The governor of Texas, since Fox News and all of that are so mad about these protests. This is what happened today, right, in Texas. And it's terrifying. The state police was sent in, the National Guard was sent in to crush these protests. And that's very scary, but that's coming from a Republican governor, Governor Abbott, the same Republican governor that was doing the whole thing about the border fence. Look, there's a shift happening in American politics, and these Palestine protests may actually be part of causing this shift. They may be partly a cause and partly a symptom, but there's a shift happening in American politics. The anti-woke blowback is coming. All right? American working people hate woke. Woke was being pumped for a while because of anger at the police state, and it was being used to get rid of Donald Trump, and it was being used because there was a fight between the federal police and the local police. But we're at the time that anti-woke blowback is coming. American working people don't like woke, right? They see how their children, how the internet is just messing up their children's minds. Kids are being taught to cancel each other and viciously target each other and cyberbully each other, and the internet is messing up kids' minds. And look, a lot of prepubescent kids are being pushed onto puberty blockers, and a lot of parents are really scared that that's going to happen to their kids. And the economy sucks right now. The economy is awful. People are being squeezed by inflation, and Joe Biden thinks that's great because we all need to have less. It's bad for the environment, man. And working families are mad about being squeezed in the economy. They're mad about their kids losing their minds with this social media toxicity and the mental health crisis facing young people. They're mad about a lot of other things that are happening with the puberty blockers and the being afraid to say what you want to say. Everyone's tired of woke. So what's happening right now is that the conservatives are getting ready to take power. And Donald Trump is probably going to win the upcoming election. I mean, who knows what could happen between now and November, but it looks like Donald Trump is going to win the upcoming election. And they are trying to channel anti-woke sentiment into anti-communist sentiment. Because I listen to a million conservative podcasts, and they all go like this. Woke people are Marxists. No, they're not. But woke people, they quote Marx or they sound like communists. Woke people are all Marxists. Joe Biden is a Marxist. China is communist. So all that stuff you're mad about, the economic degrowth and the cyberbullying, cancel culture and all of that, that's all because of China. And so we're going to have an uprising against China. Communists are against wealth. They want you to be poorer. That's why Biden's wrecking the economy and making you poor, because that's communism. Cancel culture is just like the Cultural Revolution in China. So that's communism. And that's what they're trying to do right now, because the anti-woke rebellion is coming. And so they're trying to turn the anti-woke rebellion into pro-imperialist sentiment. That's what they're trying to do right now. And these Palestine protests are a great example, because the majority of Americans, including Trump supporters, support what these protesters stand for. Did you know that? The majority of Americans don't want to support Israel. Tucker Carlson, who was the top TV host, did an interview with a Palestinian Christian about how Israel oppresses the Palestinians. Tucker Carlson, a big, huge name in the Donald Trump universe, supports the Uhuru movement right now, right? So there is a very big layer of people that are in the anti-woke MAGA camp that are against supporting Israel, that are against, the hysteria and the repression of leftists like the Uhuru movement, who basically agree with these students. But the ruling class knows that these students, because they attach themselves to Joe Biden, because they attach themselves to woke, that bothers the American people. So they're just like they whipped up a woke hysteria to justify their crackdown, on the Uhuru movement, their crackdown on Russia, or an anti-Russian hysteria. Now they're mobilizing an anti-woke sentiment, and they're trying to channel it to justify repression of these protesters, to justify repression of anti-imperialist voices, and to mobilize hysteria against China. They rode woke against Russia, and now they're riding anti-woke against China, right? The ruling class is like this. They did MK Ultra and they created drug culture, and then they did the war on drugs and used fear of drugs and hostility to drugs to build mass incarceration. They light a fire and they pee it out, right? They are very good at just riding mass sentiments. When there's a feeling among the population that exists, they manipulate it somehow to be pro-imperialist. When there was mass feelings about racism and the police state, They manipulated it to not make it against the low-wage police state, to not make it a defense of our civil liberties, but to make it a polarization between white people and black people, and to make it an anti-Russian, anti-Russian, anti-Putin hysteria. And they used a rebellion against a police state to set up more of a police state. And that's what they did with woke. Now anti-woke is coming. And again, they set up wokeism. So now they're trying to use anti-wokeism to justify more of a police state, repressing anti-imperialist voices, to justify more wars around the world, anti-China. This is how the ruling class is. There are mass sentiments that are vague, and mass sentiments tend to be vague. It's just feelings that people have, right? The feeling in the black community was that our rights are being taken away, which they were. The police are abusing us, which they were. And the ruling class took those feelings, and instead of letting them develop into opposition to capitalism and imperialism and opposition to the emerging low-wage police state, they turned it into white people have it too good and deserve to be poorer, and they turned it into Donald Trump is a racist who works for Vladimir Putin, and all Trump supporters need to be thrown in prison camps. Now, that's not what the black community wanted when they rebelled in 2020. They just wanted an end to police brutality. But they control the means of information. They control Facebook and Twitter and all that. So they manipulated a rebellion against police brutality into a pro-imperialist mobilization to oust Donald Trump and to justify further repression and to be against Russia. And now that people are sick and tired of woke, and people who are sick and tired of woke, they don't want World War III. They want America first. They want non-intervention. They don't want to support Israel. They want America first. They want us less involved overseas. They don't want more of a police state. They see the January 6th crackdown and they're opposed to it. But they're trying to manipulate anti-woke to turn it into supporting raids to crush dissidents like these college students that are protesting against Israel, blaming China and wanting more military interventions against China. They're trying to ride anti-woke now for their own ends, right? And that the problem right now is that as the American people are getting ready for an anti-woke blowback, as they're tired of the inflation and Bidenomics, as they're tired of the cancel culture, they're tired of the mental illness and the pessimism and all of the toxicity that comes from the pro-imperialist manufactured woke current. They're trying to channel that in a pro-imperialist direction, and they're trying to then use that to isolate anti-imperialist voices by labeling anti-imperialist voices as woke. So if there's ever been a time for our message of non-woke communism, non-woke socialism, patriotic, constructive socialism, city-building tendency, if there has ever been a time for our message, it's now. It is urgent that we separate wanting to end the wars, wanting peace with Russia and China, wanting to free the Uyghur movement, wanting to stop the march toward a low-wage police state, from woke toxicity. It's urgent that we do this. It is urgent. It is absolutely urgent, because if we don't make this separation now, they will ride the anti-woke sentiment, and as the American people rightly rise up against woke, they will use that sentiment to build a case for war with China, to throw anti-imperialists in jail. They're already outlawing TikTok. They're making TikTok the fall guy for what all the social media outlets have done, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. Katie Britt, in her rebuttal to Joe Biden's State of the Union, she said, TikTok is making our mentally ill people, our young people mentally ill. No, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're the ones making young people mentally ill. TikTok is just one app. Right. And it's not even controlled by China. But, but this is what they're trying to do. Right. Yeah. American people are mad about the impact that social media is having on young people. So they're saying, yeah, it's all TikTok. Well, it ain't all TikTok. This is them channeling it in a bad direction. So if there's ever been a moment where anti-woke communism was urgent, it's now. And what we need to do is we need to find, I mean, and this is really the only good thing that can come out of these Palestine mobilizations, is we need to go there and make friends. Make friends with people who have the potential to become anti-woke communists. And establish relationships. That is what we urgently need to do. I need you all to go to these protests and make a buddy. A buddy. A best bud. You know, somebody that you meet at the protests who doesn't exactly fit in with all of this, but they become your new best friend. That is what I need you to do. All right? And don't even talk to them about CPI until all of this is over. Just become their best bud. Go to the protest, meet the person, get their phone number, add them on Facebook, and take them out to dinner and go to the movies with them and talk to them about their life and get to know them. Make a best bud at one of these protests. That is what I would like you to do. Find somebody who doesn't fit in, who's not part of the PSL, who's not part of the woke apparatus that's running these protests, and become their best bud. That is the strategy that I am putting forward for how we can intervene. You know, that is what we can do. That's something that we can do to try and change the course of the way things are going. You know, and it may not be an easy thing to do, but it's what we can do. It's something that we can do. You know, I'm sorry that my computer screen is being rather odd here. You know, and you know, I believe that our community can expand, but we need to develop more of an expansionist understanding. And we just have to understand that, you know, it would be a huge mistake to run into any of these places with our message blaring. And look, the movement is very locked down, but we have the ability to really capture a lot of people's attention, right? Find some people, right? Find some people and befriend them and try to bring them around to CPI activities. You know, stuff like what we're doing this weekend is really, really important. I'm really glad that, you know, there's a number of new people coming to our workshop this weekend, people we've never met before. And I'm really glad about that, right? You know, some of the people that generally come to our stuff aren't able to make it. They're loyal members. They just aren't able to make it. But you know what? There's some people that have never been to any in real life CPI event that are coming. There's a number of them. And I think that's a really good step forward because we need to start figuring out how we can build real relationships with people. And I will say this, right? That you know, there is a current out there. I'm not even going to say that. I'll just say this. There's a big problem, and it's certainly not just in our circles, it's everywhere, of people not wanting to be part of in real life movements anymore. People who just think that this is a passive form of entertainment, right? They just get on the internet and they watch the show. And somebody else can do a better show than I can, right? I mean, I've got my camera, I got my microphone, I show clips, but it's like, you know, somebody else has a whole crew and they can advertise and all of that. And, you know, if we leave it up to the internet, we're going to lose, right? We're building a real community of people. And our real community of people is going to engage in real outreach and have real events. And we are going to do our best to try and recruit people who would never go looking for this, right? Who would never go looking for this message, ever. Would never in a million years Google anything that would lead them to this YouTube channel. That's who we need to recruit. The whole point of Out of the Movement to the Masses, is we don't want to recruit the kind of person who becomes a communist in our time. We want to recruit the kind of people who would never even consider becoming a communist. That's who we want to recruit. And we want a message that is a message that sounds like it comes from somebody who could actually run the country, right? That's what we urgently need to do. And again, this isn't a quick fix solution. And this isn't a, this isn't going to, immediately have an immediate payout. But this is what we need to do, right? And we need to continue building our community. We need to continue having events that make people feel good, that make people feel like they get to know other people, that make people feel smarter, they understand the ideology. We need to keep training people to explain this message. The other thing is, the NATO summit's coming up. And it looks like the Party of Communist USA and CPI are going to have a rally against the NATO summit. There's going to be some other rallies too, but it looks like we're going to have our own rally against it. Well, Party of Communist USA, we're going to have to hammer it out, right? We haven't even agreed on a time and location yet. I can't until this weekend is over. I'm so focused on this weekend, but until this weekend is over, we're not even going to start really thinking about it. But one thing I'm going to push for is I feel like we have to make that rally that happens against the NATO summit. Right? I don't know how big it'll be. We have friends, right? We got people like Garland Nixon. We got people like Scott Ritter. We got people, internationally who like us. We can have a decent rally. But, we're not, we need to do everything we can to make the rally that we have the opposite in tone, not in message, but in tone of the Palestine rallies that are happening. We need to have rallies that people come to and feel good. We need to have rallies that people come to and are impressed with how professional we seem, with how kind we seem, with how common sense we talk. When we were out in front of, and we've had little rallies before, CPI, and, like our rally that we did at the White House. I'll put that video up because it's really important. We had a rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, right? We had a rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula at the White House. And that rally was kind of like the kind of rally that we want to do, right? And I'll show you the video of that rally, right? And it does not look like your typical leftist rally, right? This isn't the color on this video is not actually very good. I'm going to do a different video. Right? I want to do one where the lighting is a little bit better because the lighting was off. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Here we go. Right. But this is, this was our rally, right? There's a couple like very short clips from our rally that we did at the White House, our rally for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. All right. Very good. All right. So, yeah, here's a couple clips. All right. Hold on.
The last time that Tehran put your mom into a hospital and would not allow her to get out of it because you do not have enough money to pay for her health care. I don't know about you folks, but it is Washington that has imposed that on me. It is Washington that has imposed that on American families for decades. So no, our enemies are not in Tehran. Our enemies are not in Beijing. Our enemies are not in Moscow. Our enemies are not anywhere else on the planet except for sitting right here in Washington, D.C., sitting in the White House.
Yeah. I'll show you another clip from that rally. Right? We had our American flags. We had our messaging, our members were wearing suits, right? We gave off the vibe of like a serious organization, right? It wasn't a woke rant against white privilege, rant against America, the evil racist country. It wasn't intifada. It was very common sense.
Infrastructure, we need to build up our country. No degrowth, no war in Ukraine. We need to stop all movements toward nuclear war. For my kids, for your kids, for all children in this whole planet.
Yeah, who could disagree with that? That was our member Christian, I think, from New Jersey. Who could disagree with that? Right? I mean, and we were out there in front of the White House with big American flags, and just saying what needed to be said. I mean, it was great. Yeah, I mean, I'll see if I got any other clips of it. Yeah. The main video that we had of it, the lighting didn't turn out very good, but I got like one more clip. Yeah. And this was a very small rally that we did. But yeah. But we need to start having rallies that look like this, right? That don't look like leftist rallies, right? That look different, that look like something that could appeal to the masses of people.
Gain. They are playing with our lives. They're playing with American lives. The way out is not war, it's peace and development. Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine!
Yeah. So, we eventually, and that's what I would like if it was up to me, right? Obviously, we have to negotiate with different forces involved. If we could have a rally like that with a few hundred people or thousands of people, even with lots of American flags and people in suits, people who look serious, with a message that sounds very serious about a better life for working families, about loving the country and loving the community, and not supporting our government and trying to take us into new wars, right? A message that looked like we were on the side of the majority of the people who would be walking by and would hear about it. I think we could make a difference, right? That's what we ultimately need. And there may be people at these Palestine mobilizations that are happening right now. There may be people who are there who could be won to understanding that we need to do something like that, or maybe already think that we need to do something like that, and are at the Palestine rallies and encampments and are going, why are they not like this? And are just asking that question. And what we need to do is we need to find those people and attach to them and get them in our movement, because the woke left is not going any place good, and the American people are moving rapidly against woke. They're moving rapidly against woke, but anti-woke is being channeled in a bad direction. And, we need to figure out, what's going on with Candace Owens, what's going on with Tucker Carlson. All of that's really important. The fact that Tucker Carlson is supporting the Uhuru movement, that's amazingly important. The fact that Candace Owens, had Norman Finkelstein on her show, that's amazingly and so important. Right? The fact that Joe Rogan talked about the Uhuru case for a really long time with Tucker Carlson, that's really important, right? There is an audience for our message in this country. Out of the movement to the masses. So on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations, names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. John McCarthy in Chicago, Binghamton, New York, Nate in Chicago, Seasoned Noob in China, Jeff in LA, Ryan in Kansas City, Patch in Arizona, Zach in Richmond, Virginia, Finn in Duluth, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Blake in Alabama, Martine in Queens, Bob Troy in New York, Dustin Schlesinger from Cleveland, Steve in Brisbane, Z, Laura Powers in Philadelphia, Rice in Adelaide, Australia, Sarah in Idaho, Conrad in Poland, Mariah in North Carolina, Blessing, Sergio in Mexico, Shannon from Florida, Russia, very good, Cleveland, Pirate Alex, Albert from Illinois, Eastern, Western Washington State, Philip, welcome, Philip, Niswander in Southern California, welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you with us. Names and location. Colin in Greensboro is with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Balthazar in Oakland. Flagstaff. All right. Very, very good. Grapentine in Russia. Myra in Hand. Okay. All right, folks. I'm going to now start answering your super chat questions for the remainder of the night. Now, I don't know why. There's something wrong with usually it lets me put them on the screen. I don't know why it's doing this thing where it won't, usually it lets me, put them on the screen, but it's not. I don't know what's going on here, but it usually has a thing I can push where it lets me, that lets me put them, it lets me divide the comments based on, based on, where they came from. And for some reason, it is not doing that tonight. And I don't know why it is not doing that. I don't know if that feature has been removed or not, but I see we've got, Fishop's question about Eugene Debs. And then we got John McCarthy's question about MAGA. And then we got Peter Zotti's question about CPI materials. So I'm going to start answering people's super chat questions. Oh, we got David Johnson out in Texas. Welcome. I'm going to start answering people's super chat questions. Oh, Myra's in South Africa. I'm going to start answering them, but I do want to remind you all that super chats are not just to give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. That's a good, good thing that they're for. That does help with that. They also exist so that I can pay my bills, right? I live in New York City for my job where my rent is too damn high. I do have to maintain the cost of having this extra room, this home studio that I can do my reporting from, and I can also stream from. So the super chats that you all send in, they help support the work that I do. I do want to mention that, we are having this workshop this weekend. And if in addition to, any super chat, any questions you want me to answer, if you want to just support me at the workshop, right? Help me cover my hotel and help me cover any last minute costs. You can Cash App. You can just send me on Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22. All right. And you can just Cash App me if you're able to send some kind of contribution. That would help, me get through the weekend and get everything to be where it need to be. Shout out to the people who did, there's 3 or 4 people that have already sent a contribution, and I do appreciate it. If you want to Cash App me to help me get through the weekend, that's appreciated. And if you want to send a super chat to help support this channel and help me continue to do what I do, that's great. And let me add CPI money and the money that goes to this channel or to me are separate. I do not have access to CPI funds. Other people handle them. There was innuendo before. People were saying things that were just ridiculous, that weren't true. But in order to make sure there's no innuendo, I don't handle CPI funds. So if you want to donate to the Center for Political Innovation, that's great. That helps us do CPI activities, but I have no access to those funds. If you donate to this channel, if you send a super chat, if you Cash App me, or you join the Patreon, that's supporting me. That's different. So I just want to get that out of the way. But if you can send a contribution or a super chat question, give me something to talk about, it is appreciated. So now I'm going to have to keep scrolling up in order to do this. I don't know why it's not letting me pull up the things on the screen. And but first we'll ask about Eugene Debs. Why don't you discuss Eugene Debs that much? Well, here's the thing. We do talk about Eugene Debs. And in fact, in the new textbook, Out of the Movement to the Masses, the first original text that we include is the anti-war speech of Eugene Debs. And we put the whole thing in there. A lot of people reprint Eugene Debs' Canton, Ohio anti-war speech that he went to federal prison for giving. A lot of people reprint it, and they only reprint certain parts of it. They only reprint the part that everyone remembers about the rich fight the war, or the rich start the wars and the poor fight them and all that. We did the whole thing, right? And this speech is really, really a really, really important anti-war speech. And we republished the whole thing. Eugene Debs was a great hero. He was a great socialist agitator. He was like a traveling preacher who went from town to town preaching socialism, and he eventually went to prison for giving an anti-war speech. Wallace Wattles, the father of modern self-help, actually used Eugene Debs is the great example of an optimistic, positive person, which I thought is great. If you read Wallace Wattles, he talks a lot about Eugene Debs. So, I really like Eugene Debs. The problem is the only reason you probably don't hear me talk about him that much, right? And you said that much. Why don't you talk about him that much? Is because, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who talk about Eugene Debs because he wasn't tied with any state, right? Eugene Debs, he made some vague comments about supporting the Bolsheviks, but he was against the Soviet Union after a while, mainly because he was in prison, and the only people he was talking to in prison were Socialist Party people who were against the Communist Party. And, he was never tied to any state, so he's safe. All right, there's a million books about Eugene Debs by people who hate all the existing socialist countries. And the same for the Wobblies, the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, Socialist Radical Labor Union, never tied to any state, right? And that the Communist Party, on the other hand, was tied to the Soviet Union and Stalin. And because of that, there's a lot of college professors and others who don't want to talk about the great things that they did. And so I, on the other hand, focus on the great things that they did, right? I tend to focus on, the fact that, the Communist Party did so much to advance the anti-racist struggle, built the unemployment councils, built the industrial unions. I talk about William Z. Foster. I talk about these things. I also talk about the Maoist movement of the 70s and different groups because of the fact that there's not as much talk about them among academics because of the fact that they're not tied to, because of the fact that they are tied to a state. And Eugene Debs, because he's not tied to any state. Well, Bernie Sanders talks at length about how he loves Eugene Debs. Bernie Sanders, who supports Israel, wants to have World War III with Russia. I love Eugene V. Debs. Eugene Debs was a great man because he went around and gave speeches. It's, Bernie Sanders can like Debs because Debs isn't tied to anything that, he's not tied to a real mass anti-imperialist country, right? And that's important. So there you go. And thank you, Chris, for your super chat. It is appreciated. All right. So now let me scroll up, right? Because I don't know why it's not letting me put the super chats on the screen like it usually does. I have to scroll up for each super chat, but that's okay. That's okay. Hold on. I'm scrolling up. So John McCarthy says, a lot of the same MAGA who were championing the Guard need to refuse to fire on Americans are now demanding they need to be used against Americans. Yeah, it's scary, how at this point, and most of the MAGA people, if you look at the polling, a pretty solid majority of the entire American public doesn't support the blind support for Israel and agrees with these protesters. So they're going overtime to demonize these protesters as violent and scary and anti-Semitic. And, and some people, a lot of people in the MAGA universe are falling for it. And, we have to find a way to intervene, right? And so our job in this moment is a difficult one. It's not easy. But we need to find a way that we intervene in a way that all the good things about anti-woke don't get lost, and that the narrative that all communists are woke and that wokeism is China's fault, we have to somehow try to find a way to push against that narrative and build an actual anti-imperialist bloc. And it is not easy. It is not easy what we're trying to do. But the biggest mistake that we could make, and I'll just emphasize this before I go on to the next question. The biggest mistake we could make right now would be to deteriorate into wokeism, right? And that's very tempting right now. Oh, look, the anti-woke circles are all becoming super anti-China, and these protesters are right, which they are, right? The Palestine protesters are right. They're against Israel, right? They're for a good cause. So let's just run to their side, right? And that would be a huge mistake. That would be exactly what the ruling class wants to do. They want everyone to think that all pro-Palestine people are woke, and so they can mobilize anti-woke to crush the pro-Palestine movement. They want people to think that all pro-China people are woke, so they can mobilize anti-woke to crush pro-China people. And it would be the biggest mistake we could ever make if we saw this moment where the anti-woke circles are being dominated by this pro-imperialist thinking as they become the more dominant faction. If we just then said, oh, and we just ran and we just joined up with PSL, we just started going to the People's Forum and we just attached ourselves to woke again. That would be a huge, and the thing is, woke circles might become more tolerant of us now, and they already are. I mean, I could give you some examples, but suddenly all these people who hated us, right, are now saying, oh, now that the ruling class is no longer pumping woke the same way, and now that woke money is being cut off, and now that woke is being deflated, suddenly they'll have us again. Suddenly they'll be seen with us again. I could give you some examples, but we need to not take the easy way out. We need to not reinforce. The ruling class wants to make this a polarization. There's woke people and anti-woke people, and they're trying to create this polarization. And they want, now that anti-woke is starting to get the upper hand, they want to make anti-woke into a pro-imperialist current. And they want all anti-imperialism to be associated with wokeism. And we cannot fall into that trap. If we joined ANSWER or we joined the United National Anti-War Committee, that would be exactly what they wanted, right? Because at that point, everything that has led to CPI's success, everything that's made CPI special, we're the reason that Tucker Carlson talks about the Uhuru movement. It's because of us, right? Think about that. Let that sink in for a moment. We have had a really big impact. And if we just retreated into aligning with the woke people again, we would be losing everything that made us special. And we would be essentially doing exactly what the ruling class wants. So we can't do that. That would be the biggest mistake we could make in our time. And it might be tempting, especially because we could do it now, right? Suddenly these people, don't mind having us around because all their money's being cut off, right? They're being deflated all of a sudden, right? There's some examples. I don't want to name names, but a certain organization that's been nothing but hostile to CPI and nothing but hostile to our political allies approached us recently, begging us to work with them again. Well, we don't want to be enemies, right? We don't want to be enemies. It's not like we want to, have a blood feud with these people until the end of time. But the only reason they want to work with us again is because all the woke money, all of that's completely deflated now, and they're desperate for anyone to work with. And well, I'm sorry, but that would be a huge retreat on our part, right? It's anyway. But anyway, the next question, right? Scrolling up. All right. That's the problem with this. Does CPI have a pamphlet or something to pass out? Yes, sir, we do. We've got palm cards, glossy palm cards that you can pass out. Send me an email. We'll arrange for that, right? CalebMoppin@gmail. We also have our book, right? I'm sure a lot of these Palestine protesters, they support the Houthis. We have a whole book. Who are the Houthis and what are they fighting for, right? This book is, we can send it to you in bulk at print cost. Just tell me how many you want. It costs us like $2 or $3 a copy, and you can sell them for ever many you want, or you can just hand them out or whatever. We can give you these in bulk to distribute. That's one thing you can do. We can send you the palm cards to distribute. For 1,000 of them, it's very cheap, and we got loads of outreach materials. If you want to do outreach for CPI, we can make that happen. Send me an email, CalebMoppin@gmail, and we'll put an order in the mail and we'll stock you up with all kinds of stickers. And, we have made all kinds of outreach materials. All right. There we go. That answered that question. All righty. Just scrolling up, right? Political and economic reason for globalist degrowth. Well, the problem is this, right? And this is, I talk about this a lot, and maybe it gets repetitive, but it's important, right? Growth is not bad. Growth is the nature of humanity. Human beings are always expanding their population, expanding their life expectancy, and using their environment more efficiently, finding out new ways to make the environment serve us, right? If we were still burning wood in order to heat our homes, we would have deforested the planet like 3 times over by now, right? No question about it. We would have run out of wood. but we have invented much more efficient ways of heating our homes, like coal, like natural gas, like electricity, right? And that human beings, the entire history of human beings, is reinventing our relationship with nature. And so the idea that we have limited resources and we're just going to run out of resources, that's assuming that we're always going to use fossil fuels. Well, China is pushing fusion energy right now, right? And they're making great breakthroughs. The idea that we're always going to remain on fossil fuels and we're always going to have exactly the same access to fossil fuels, in our lifetime, that has changed. Hydraulic fracking was invented. There's way more, for a long time, they were talking about peak oil. You remember peak oil? Oh, we were going to run out of oil and there was going to be an oil scarcity. Well, peak oil was malarkey because of hydraulic fracking and deep sea drilling. There's way more oil than we ever imagined. Right. So, the idea that yes, if we just continued to extract resources the way we do now, we'll run out in 100 years or so. Yes. But human beings are not like that. Human beings are constantly reinventing their relationship with nature. This is what the real issue is. The reason they're pushing degrowth, the reason they're saying, oh, limited resources, finite planet, growth is bad. The reason that they're pushing that is this. We live in a system where abundance creates poverty. People are homeless because there are too many houses. People are hungry because there is too much food. This has never happened before in any other system, but capitalism is the first system in history to have this problem, gluts on the market. And, self-driving cars is a great example. In a rational society, self-driving cars would be a great, amazing thing because this job called driving would no longer be necessary. It would no longer be a necessary thing to do because we could simply, we could simply do other things because the cars would drive themselves. But in our system, right, where your only value is your ability to sell yourself to an employer, when you eliminate a job of driving, that results in all kinds of people being unemployed. That's not rational. And then all those unemployed people, their ability to buy things decreases. Capitalism has this problem where the more wealth that's created, the poorer people get, right? And it gets there's insane examples of this. The government buys huge amounts of cheese and buries it in a cave in Missouri. You can look this up. The cave in Missouri full of cheese. The government buys in huge numbers cheese and buries it in a cave in order to keep the price of dairy from going down, right? What they call overproduction, Peter Coffin has started calling it a value crisis. This is a built-in problem of capitalism, right? And it's not rational. And because of this problem, where more wealth and more abundance and more technological advancement leads to poverty and gluts on the market where products can't be sold, the only way that capitalists can deal with this and stay in power is by forcibly degrowing, right? Reducing consumption. And that's called Malthusianism, right? For a long time, the ruling class, there's been a faction of people going back to Robert Malthus, the British economist, who thought that the problems of capitalism were always just because of overpopulation. There's too many people. And so they wanted to degrow, to reduce the population, reduce consumption in order to stabilize the economy, right? And that is a long-standing trend among the ultra-rich. The Rockefeller family, they were founders of the Neo-Malthusian Society in Britain. And they bankrolled Margaret Sanger and her birth control league, which is now called Planned Parenthood. And they believed that the Great Depression of the 1930s was caused by too many people, right? And it wasn't caused by too many people. It was caused by the irrational capitalist system where abundance creates poverty, where technological advancement leads to everyone getting poorer, right? And so what we need is a planned economy. And with a planned economy, growth will no longer be restrained. And human growth and technological advancement and rising living standards can all happen at once, right? But as long as profits are in command of production, you're not going to overcome this problem, right? Overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit. This is the problem with capitalism, right? Is that abundance creates poverty, poverty amid plenty, poverty created by abundance. That is a problem that we need to overcome. And a lot of the richest capitalists think that the way to overcome it is to just reduce the population. They want to make the world even poorer than it already is so that they can stay rich and they can stay at the top of the world. And that's why they're pushing degrowth. And degrowth is fascism, right? That's what the Nazis did. They rebooted the German economy by putting a huge chunk of the population in prison camps to be free slave laborers for corporations, by military spending, right? And if you look at Nazi Germany, I quote Lothrop Stoddard and other fascists describing how the Nazi method for stabilizing the German economy, and they did, they eradicated unemployment and they rebuilt the German economy, but they did it by forcibly degrowing, right? And that fascism is largely degrowth economics. That's the essence of what fascism is. Fascism is trying to save capitalism with degrowth methods, using the state to forcibly degrow the economy in order to stabilize the capitalist market. That's the nature of fascist economics. It's not socialism. Socialism is when the banks, factories, and industries and the centers of economic power are organized to serve the people. And with rational planning of the economy, growth can continue. And the ultimate goal is a world with so much wealth and so much abundance where people can just do what they feel like doing, where the need for the state fades away from each according to their own ability to each according to their needs. That is the ultimate goal. So there you go. Hope that answered your question. I think there's another super chat up there. I'm just scrolling up. Oh, Lee Stranahan gave a great speech about Debs. He did give a very, very good speech about Eugene Debs at the CPI convention in December. It was a beautiful speech that he gave. And he's a conservative. He's a libertarian conservative. But he gave a very, very beautiful speech about Eugene Debs and about why Eugene Debs was a great anti-war hero at the CPI convention. And it was really, really great. And Lee Stranahan is a friend of mine, and he's a good person. You know what I mean? And he comes out of InfoWars and he comes out of, libertarian and conservative circles, but he gets it. He understands these things. So yeah, we really love Lee Stranahan. He's a really good friend of ours. And, again, you find out who the real ones are and who the phonies are. You find this out over time, right? When crisis happens, when weird things happen, you find this out, So look, folks, I'm very excited about the upcoming workshop this weekend, and I'm really proud of this book. I was reading this. I had to give this to some international comrades I met with today. So I was looking at a copy of this on the train and I thought, man, we did a great thing as CPI. Shout out to Elizabeth. Shout out to Marissa. This book is really something special. This is like a college textbook, right? It's got a huge amount of information in it, right? Original text, original speeches. You will read this book, you will know all about being an anti-imperialist and being a communist in America and where do we go from here and all this. I'm really proud of this. And I'm really glad to do a series of classes this weekend about it. Really proud of my organization and proud of the people that we put together. And I think that we have the potential with our unique understanding to build something really, really special. But it's not going to be easy, right? It's not going to be easy. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. Let me repeat that. There are no shortcuts. And if you just tail after things, and that's what a lot of people are doing. They're trying to take a shortcut right now. All the communist groups are there. It's like a circus outside of Columbia University. I was there today. RevCom, RCP, and Socialist Alternative, and the Vegetarian Religious Group, and the PSL, and the Spartacists, and they're all out there, engaging in what Lenin called bowing to spontaneity. Tailism. They're just running there and saying, wow, we support you and we're communists, so you should be a communist too. And it's like, what? How is that helping? Right? We know that the kind of movement that's going on the campuses, while they're right, They are absolutely right that we shouldn't be supporting Israel. That kind of movement is not going to lead anywhere good. The bulk of the American working class will never join a woke college movement that is exuding hate, right? That is exuding degrowth, that is exuding pessimism and negativity and rage, that sees the American public as their enemy. The overwhelming majority of people who are the makers of history, the masses of the people are the makers of history, right? They will never join such a movement. So, I mean, as much as I hope these students are able to raise a lot of awareness about the crimes of Israel and about U.S. complicity in it, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but these movements are doomed. They're doomed because they don't have a mass approach, and they view the working class and the masses as their enemy. And they're, I mean, they're in the context of the anti-woke blowback. They're going to be used to, for a lot of these movements are doomed. What we can hope for is that it can be the gateway drug, that there's a few people out there who will come to one of these mobilizations because they agree with the message, because the message is correct. And they'll be able to, through that, find our optimistic, hopeful movement, right? And what I said here, by the way, about the strategy of how we can intervene, go to these protests and lurk and look for good people and get their phone numbers and become their friends and then get them to a CPI event. We should be doing that strategy everywhere. You should be doing that at your church. You should be doing that at your workplace. You should be doing it everywhere. But you're going to have more success. You're going to have a lot more success doing it at places that have a dissident vibe to them, right? Go to Libertarian Party meetups, right? Go to Green Party meetups. Go to RFK events, right? Go to, if Cornel West comes and speaks in your neighborhood, go to it. Go to places where people that are looking for answers go, and find people and become their friends, right? That is what we need to do. That is the strategy of how our movement will expand, right? And it's not easy, and it's scary. And I know it's harder for a lot of young people now. I mean, a lot of young people don't have friends in real life. They just are on the computer all day, and that breaks my heart. And but I'm just telling you that that's not how history is really made, right? History is not really made by, people on the internet, right? And the internet culture, the internet toxic culture, we know that that's not going to change history, right? But we think that we can start meeting people. We think that we can start recruiting people, right? We think that we can start expanding, and I believe we can. But we're trying to take things in a completely new direction. But we absolutely need to start figuring out how we can pilfer off the good people from all the dissident spaces, right? And I believe in all the dissident spaces right now, libertarian, MAGA, socialist, leftist, Green Party, pro-Palestine, anti-vax, wherever you find dissidents, you're going to find good people. You're going to find people that are open to what we have to say. But we need to learn the art of going into dissident spaces and finding good people, befriending them, and bringing them into our community. That is what we need to learn the art of doing. And the main thing we have to do is just do it. Because it's not going to be easy at first, but the more we do it, the more effective it's going to be. And that is what we need to do. We need to find a way to go into dissident communities and pilfer off the good people and win them over. Go to the places that people go when they're looking, when they're searching. Go to those places and find the good people that are looking for what we have. Maybe they don't even know about it yet. Maybe they don't even know about it yet. They don't know that they're looking for what we have, but they are. That's what we need to do, right? And that's my advice. That's how we can intervene in what's going on. So on that note, folks, unless there's more super chat questions that people have, I'm going to wrap this up because it is pretty late and I got an early morning tomorrow. And I got a busy weekend, and I may stream tomorrow afternoon, but it's not clear. And I definitely won't stream Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Might stream Monday night, depending on how much sleep I've gotten. But yeah, so I think I'm probably going to end this here. But I might be back tomorrow. Definitely this weekend, I'm going to be in Vermont, engaging with my comrades, teaching classes, etc. That's where I'm going to be. And so I'm putting on the closing music.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.